I'm Greg Hunter. Welcome to USAWatchdog.com. We're going to go off the beaten path today, way off the beaten path. We're going to go down to Antarctica. I know it sounds bizarre, but a lot of people been going to Antarctica. Big, important people. They've been going to Antarctica recently. They have been going to Antarctica ever since, well, the very beginning of President Obama's very first term. And I compiled a list of headlines for you, so we can anchor this in some reality before we get into a reality and introduce our guest. And I just want to start with this headline. Obama sends Biden on special mission to Antarctica. Look at the date, Huffington Post, 1/22/09. Right after he is inaugurated, for the very first time, President Obama sends Vice President Biden to Antarctica. Don't you think that's bizarre? And now we fast forward to John Kerry, the Secretary of State. John Kerry's Antarctic visit highlights continent and climate policies under threat. That's the New York Times, 11/15/16. This was election day. The date is the date of the article, but this was election day. He was asked all kinds of questions about it. Was very squirmy on it, very weaselly. Didn't really want to give a lot. Wanted to just talk about climate change. 11/15/16, Putin to visit Antarctica. This is the Moscow Times, 1/18/17. Patriarch Kirill, this is the Russian Pope. This is after the first meeting of the Roman Catholic Pope Francis, and they haven't met in 1,000 years. Patriarch Kirill meets penguins at Russian base as he becomes first Orthodox leader to visit Antarctica. That's the Daily Telegraph, or the Telegraph in 2016. Secret Nazi military base discovered by Russian scientists in the Arctic. This is the UK Independent. This is something equivalent to, the New York Times or Washington Post. Secret Nazi military base discovered by Russian scientists in the Arctic. And this is in the Independent. And then let's just go over here. This is the Governor General's historic visit to Antarctica. This is the Governor General of Australia, February 4th, 2013. And last but not least, Buzz Aldrin, who is a Freemason, is medically evacuated from where? Antarctica. Listen, Antarctica is not on the way to anywhere. The president can't, fly to the Middle East and say, oh, I think I'll stop off in Germany. Antarctica is a place you can go to that is the size of, you could probably fit it right into the continental United States and Canada. It's a continent. It's a huge landmass. And you can only get to Antarctica by going through Patagonia or through South America, the tip of South America, the Drake Strait, I believe it's called, or go to New Zealand and go that way. That's the way Kerry went through to Antarctica. So why am I saying all this about Antarctica? Well, folks, to me as a reporter, a former mainstream media reporter, something is going on. And I looked for somebody who could come on and say, what do you think is going on? And our next guest is a 25-year talk show host. He is the author of 11 books, 2 of which have to do with Antarctica. He's got also a documentary film producer. He is a precious metals dealer. He's first dealt with the Antarctica, actually Nazis in Antarctica. Probably people thought he was crazy back in 2005, and now it's out in the mainstream press. Nazis in Antarctica in 2005. His latest book has come out just in December of 2016 called Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II. Now, this is an artist rendition. This isn't a real picture of a flying saucer, but you get the point. This is Empire Beneath the Ice. This is the latest of 11 books by, and let's bring him on, Steve Quayle of SteveQuayle.com. Steve Quayle, I know it was a very long introduction, but thank you for joining us today on USAWatchdog.com.
Well, Greg, this is a delight for me to come on and to share with your viewers just why Antarctica is in the news and in the headlines to the degree it is. It was left kind of as just that ice base south of South America. But what most people don't understand, and this is critical, is that in 1947, the United States sent a war flotilla to the Antarctic under Admiral Byrd, and it was called Operation Highjump, and it was to seek out and to destroy the hidden Nazi bases that intelligence agencies had provided them the documentation for. It wasn't a small thing, 13 ships, 4,700 men, and the state-of-the-art, if you will, advances in U.S. weaponry. The bad news is we got our rear ends kicked, and in 1947, it was actually February, the thing started in August of 46, ended in 1947, Admiral Byrd came back and reported to Congress what had happened. The Russians, incidentally, had made a video, because they were spying, of our aircraft encountering flying saucers. Now, in order to put this into perspective, two of the heads of NASA, which is our National Aeronautic and Space Administration, were former Nazis, very prominent scientists.
Operation, and just how did that happen? And let's just go ahead and tell people a program called Operation Paperclip, where we were in a rush to beat the Russians, to go into Germany and take their scientists and bring them over to America to help with our warfare, Defense Department, and advance our technology. Correct?
Absolutely. And when you deal with Hermann Oberth and you deal with Dr. Wernher von Braun, and Hermann Oberth's famous statement is, think not that we Germans were brighter than any other scientists. We had help from other worlds. And that's interesting because, over the years...
That was actually, and just so you know, I just want to kind of bring this in here, because I don't want people... we talked about this in the very pre-interview, that I don't want people to think you're crazy, Steve Quayle. You're not crazy. I would never put you on if I thought you were. And many people are fans of yours and do not think you're crazy. Some people may. But that quote that you gave was a quote that I heard for my own ears on the History Channel. I heard that quote that you just gave. So go ahead. I interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, Operation Paperclip, but there were 7 other operations under the same thing. We brought in, for instance, even the Japanese weapons designer, Dr. Ishii, ISHI. So that was the plan of Western intelligence to bring it in. So let's get back to the Antarctic. When Admiral Byrd came back, he had the first Secretary of Defense on his side to tell the American people what was really going on in the Antarctic, and that was Forrestal. Forrestal, again, was the first Secretary of Defense, and when he was wanting to tell the American people what they had found through Operation Highjump and the advanced technology, he was thrown out a 3rd-story window at Bethesda Naval Hospital. So when you're dealing with the Antarctica and you're dealing with the history of the Antarctica, it is steeped in absolute, not only mythology and, let's just say this, mythological references, but in the 1500s, even the Piri-Reis map showed Antarctica without ice. Now, that basically comes into total conflict with a modern geologic time frame of glaciation. So what really is going down there? And here's the billion-dollar question, probably trillion. Why are the world's religious leaders and the world's most powerful leaders going to the Antarctica? I don't think Kirill, the Russian Orthodox patriarch, is going down there to, just basically meet penguins. And with no disrespect, man, someone or something, and it's both, has summoned the world's leaders, both political and religious, to the Antarctica. And I believe that based on Admiral Byrd's testimony, the testimony of multiple generals, multiple intelligence people. I've been on talk radio, Greg, 25 years, and I couldn't know what I'm sharing with your audience unless someone told me. So I don't know everything, but I certainly know what they've told me in reference to Antarctica.
I want to get into, so you think that there are actual beings, actual people there living in their, quote, empire beneath the ice, and you think they are summoning world leaders down there for a face-to-face, because they certainly don't want to email end up at WikiLeaks.
Absolutely. And the interesting thing is that this goes right along. We were talking in the time before we went live that even Francis Bacon in the 1627 in his New Atlantis was referring to ancient technology that, by the way, he didn't get to finish the book, but ancient technology that was astounding, from genetic engineering to skyscrapers, laser weapons. I mean, this is in 1627. So what we're dealing with is the idea, Greg, that there is an advanced civilization. Now, I want to clear up something. There are those who believe that we were created by aliens. I'm not on that bandwagon. The Anunnaki, I'll make this easy, just the simplest statement. The Anunnaki are the fallen angels. That's who's represented in all the Sumerian presentations on their stelae, on their drawings and their clay tablets, everything. But the Bible talks about fallen angels. Now, why is that so important? Because we're dealing with the time where we're going to see a universal religion, a universal government, and a universal monetary system. And now, after we watch Davos, now everybody wants to take the cash away from America. Obviously, they're doing a trial run in India. But it's as if all of the world's leaders, and especially the most prominent religious leaders, are having to answer to someone who has superior intellect, superior intelligence, but a very, I would say, dark and sinister future for the world. In other words, global control of everything and everyone. So that's who I believe is summoning everyone down there. Now, listen, Antarctica is a continent. You made that point. And by people not recognizing the fact of the size of it, the Nazis found evidence. And so did the British, and so did the Russians, of a, if you will, a land beneath the ice. It was actually a Doug McClure movie that was, I think there were 2 or 3 of them, German U-boats going into these vast tunnels. Now, here's what's interesting. The pyramids have come back into prominence that are in Antarctica. We're now seeing all of the...
in other words, there are big, huge pyramids under the ice in Antarctica.
Right, and as Antarctica starts to melt, there's 2 reasons that Antarctica is melting. And, they'll claim the ice sheet is deeper here or lesser there, or the big crack. But the point that's important for people to understand is there are so many volcanoes around the continent of Antarctica, both within the ice and surrounding the ice, not to mention that a lot of the electromagnetic warfare, which, by the way, is a real thing. If you're talking about heating the ionosphere up with what are called ionospheric heaters, there's 72 of them around the world. When you're getting all of the backscatter of actual radio waves melting, in essence, they're microwaving the poles, one cannot be surprised that literally the ice is melting. Now, why are these people here? The biggest announcement that's getting set to come, the Vatican is already prepping the way that if there are aliens, can they be baptized? My answer is no, they're not created in the image and likeness of God. My answer to those that say, well, God's a figment of your imagination, the aliens created us, then my simple statement is who created them? And for the record, we're talking about civilizations that even according to the Sumerian Table of Kings go back 225,000 years. So I deal with a lot of, I would say, pre-Adamic stuff, meaning prior to the creation of Adam and Eve, 6,000 years ago, there were civilizations on the earth that also got into genetic manipulation. And interestingly enough, so much of it goes back to Antarctic. So I believe it's almost like, if you will, 2001 Space Odyssey. They're not just finding the obelisks on the moon. They're finding the entities, and in my opinion, they're fallen angels. And let me make something clear. Fallen angels, because they are of a different level of creation, don't die. So we're talking about things that can pass on hidden, esoteric, occult knowledge and have to the adepts, those who basically buy the lie, get to do the, if you will, they're brought up to speed on what are called black physics. Black physics are what exists beyond the PhD level of physics. And we're seeing it in CERN. I think what is so critical for people to understand is as more activity takes place in CERN, the occult rituals associated with it are so in your face that, you can't dismiss this kind of stuff anymore as being, oh, the rantings of this fringe or that fringe. Something is happening, and the Antarctic is critical. It's my contention that because of the advanced technology of the Third Reich, and especially their pharmaceuticals and their finances and everything, and you mentioned Operation Paperclip and their intelligence, that they went under the ice, so to speak, and that they pretty much came into contact with beings, sentient beings, which obviously Hermann Oberth and Wernher von Braun and others have made reference to so many times until they passed away. So all this stuff is a matter of record. And when you put all the records together, it points to this. There is some entity or group of entities that are sentient, that means obviously they're thinking, that have advanced technology, and that basically give orders to the religious and political leaders of our day.
I want to just point out one thing real quick. Two things, actually. Watch your mic. You're kind of tapping your table. But the other thing I want to point, the most important thing I want to point out, and I don't want to stop the recording for that. The other thing I want to point out is that you are a Christian. I mean, I watched this, and I'm going to go to my screen right here. I watched, this is something you sent me, your Legends series, the Unholy Sea. And you basically come in there and say, everybody wants to talk about the Anunnaki as your friend. They are our friends. That's what we've been conditioned. And you're saying, oh, no. They are evil. They are our enemies. They are an enemy of God. You are a Christian man. And so is Tim, the other person that was in here. You guys are Christians, and you're saying, hey, this is what they're preparing us for is something evil. It's like the second Tower of Babel with Nebuchadnezzar. What is his name? Nebuchadnezzar, is that him?
Nimrod.
I'm sorry. That's I'm mixing up my Bible. I am not a Bible scholar, although I am a Christian. But they're basically setting us up for this new world order, which is the same thing they tried after the flood, same thing they had before the flood. I was talking to my brother-in-law about this. I said, if you look at the Bible, we don't really know much about what happened before the flood. I mean, the flood is in chapter 6 of Genesis. And before that, you don't really know the history before the flood. People lived a long time. The population of Earth got evil. I mean, it got so evil that, God wiped them out. But you're saying that, these fallen angels, they're not our friends. They're not our buddies. They're here to basically take control of the Earth and the human population, I guess, is what you would say.
Well, I'm
saying right? Is that correct?
That's pretty accurate, but I will also say this, that in Tim's trips to both Rome and to Peru...
say Tim's last name. Tim's last name is...
Timothy Alberino.
Alberino, just so you guys know, I'm going to put this up here. He and Steve are featured in this Legends. Wonderful talent. A handsome guy, wonderful talent, great stuff. And I mean, go ahead. And let's go back to you. In Tim's trips, yes?
Well, the central theme in all this, we met with Zecharia Sitchin's personal friend. And Zecharia Sitchin wrote a series of tremendously well-researched books, but he drew the wrong conclusion. In our film, The Unholy Sea, we actually have, and by the way, the guy's an Italian billionaire, and he actually talks about the time where Zecharia Sitchin said to him that he had an Anunnaki, fallen angel, on his bed, and was dictating many of the blanks that Zecharia Sitchin hadn't found through research. After that point, up until that point, Greg, interestingly enough, the Catholic Church kind of put Zecharia Sitchin on their no-go list. After that meeting, there were emissaries and ambassadors meeting with Zecharia Sitchin regularly. Now, here's the reason why. Mount Graham is in Arizona. This all relates to Antarctica. And the Vatican's telescope there is one of the largest binocular telescopes in the world.
With the University of Arizona State University.
Yes. And it's called Lucifer, okay, the Lucifer device.
Unbelievable.
When Tom Horn was there, meaning with his film crew, they literally made the comment, these are the foremost astronomers in the world, astrophysicists, all these guys, specialists on exobiotic entities, that means alien life forms. And they made the statement that sometimes the fields, they have to wait for a half an hour to an hour for the fields to clear because there are so many spacecraft. Now, go back to 1947. Roswell, the incident in Roswell, New Mexico. If people want to know the true history of flying saucers, they need to do an internet search on Ben Rich, the former head of Lockheed Martin Marietta, because he said there's basically two kinds of craft, meaning flying saucers, ours and theirs, the same thing that Oberth and Wernher von Braun were referring to. So when you're at the most famous binocular telescope, and this is one of a kind, the Lucifer looks into the infrared spectrum, in other words, out of the visible light spectrum.
Deep into space.
Deep into space. And then you see in the book by Arthur C. Clarke called Childhood's End. Did you see that?
No, I did not.
Very important, because basically the image of the aliens portrayed in Arthur C. Clarke's book, and that actually they made, I think, a couple part series on the Sci-Fi Channel, but the aliens portrayed that the Vatican has announced and told Tom Horn about looked like something out of basically a medieval gargoyle woodcut. Now, why is this critical? Why would you even open the dialogue to aliens if there wasn't basically some concern about them? And if we have always been led to believe by the powers that be that control the dissemination of this information, by the way, when you get into the world of aliens, stargates, advanced technology, et cetera, that's where the men in black come in. And so what I believe, it's God's time to fulfill the words of Jesus when there's nothing that's hidden that isn't going to be revealed. And you know, Jesus said an interesting thing, Greg. He said, if I've told you earthly things and you believe me not, how can I tell you heavenly things? But people can't dismiss the trips of the most powerful people to the Antarctic.
That's just what we know about. What I listed was just what we know about.
Absolutely. And again, as you follow in my book, I lay it out carefully how the United States government absorbed the scientists, the intelligence agents. And for the record, the SS wasn't just, I can't pronounce the word, but the SS in the esoteric realm was known as a Schwarzsonne, Schwarz, Sonne, S-O-N-N-E, which means black sun. So the idea that Admiral Byrd was trying to get across to everybody that would understand, by the way, they put him under lock and key and told him to shut up after a certain point. But the point is, he said that, at first he thought, and this is Admiral Byrd, this is interesting because it goes along with Ben Rich, too, the former head. By the way, Ben Rich, the guy I was talking about, Lockheed, was known as the father of stealth technology. And he makes one statement. I got to read this to you because it's this critical. He said, when Rich was asked how UFO propulsion worked, he said, let me ask you, how does ESP work? The question responded with, all points in time and space are connected. And that's when he said, that's how it works. So we didn't even get into the understanding of black holes, parallel universes, time travel, space travel, time dilation, all these things until probably the early 50s. You know, interestingly enough, one of the best science fiction movies was Invaders from Mars, which even brought up the implant. But getting back to the Antarctica, when I have talked to the people I've talked to over the years, whether they've been in military and high ranking, I'm talking active duty.
People call you on the phone and come by in Bozeman, Montana, is where you are now, and they come to see you, and you're going to tell us what they tell you. Go ahead, hit me.
Well, first of all, a lot of them, obviously with the internet, everybody knows who's talking to everybody, and with the National Spy Organization, most everything is known. But there are times when the people literally show up at my office, or they'll want to meet. And by the way, I don't meet with anybody anywhere without, backup, because again, this stuff is very sensitive. But they come by and they talk and they tell me what's really going on. Somebody said, I've been there. I have spent time in the underground, if you will, citadels in the Antarctic. Now, these are guys who, by the way, in the military, you always hear this, well, that's above my pay grade. Well, early on, I said, listen, I don't want to talk to anybody who makes that claim. I want to talk to the guys that can't make that claim because they are the top of the pay grade. So, fortunately, I believe God gave me a promise, and I believe it's fulfilled in a statement. If you will tell people what's really going on, I'll bring the people to you that will tell you what's really going on. Hey, I live in Bozeman, Montana, the frozen north, at least lately. Beautiful place, but who comes out of their way? Who flies in? Who says you want to meet? And by the way, they meet with me in my office with my people there, etc. I don't meet anybody off. Or they call me, or they text me, or they produce by courier, documents, which, by the way, once I read them, I commit them to my memory and I destroy them. That's the only safe way I know to be, Greg. But the thing is that the common thread is the fact that there is a group, and I will call them this, of fallen angels. People can call them exobiotic entities. They can call them aliens, but they're fallen angels. Now, obviously, who wants a one world religion that's totally at war with the God of the Bible? It would be the fallen angels, and Lucifer as their head, who became Satan. The thing is that Satan means adversary. And what's interesting, just as an aside, if you look at even the headlines of today on Matt Drudge, you're looking at cannibalism, you're looking at sitcoms, you're looking at people going nuts and eating people's faces. The best thing I can tell everyone is even when you're dealing with giants, and a giant, I'm talking the historic giants such as Goliath, and they're found all over the world. You know, I've written extensively on giants for, I guess, almost 35 years. The point being is that the one common denominator, and you come into Latin America, Mexico, South America, everybody had an appetite for human flesh. That's where we get the word ghouls. So what's fascinating to me, as all of this information is breaking, that we're dealing with more and more, quote, references to ancient beings, to giant beings, and the concurrent headlines dealing with cannibalism. You know, most people don't understand that the Aztec, Inca, and Maya all practiced ritual cannibalism, but they all claim that the giants from the East built their civilizations. In other words, people with war hammers, war claws, and spears made out of shells and obsidians didn't build the edifices, the pyramids, and also, Greg, they're worldwide. They're in Antarctica. They're in the Arctic. They're all over the world. China's got some of the biggest pyramids in the world, and they basically burned dirt up to them and then made terraces and planted trees. So the point that I guess is critical for people to understand, the Antarctic, and mark my words, will become the source of the continuing and ongoing revelation that's going to basically shake everyone's belief system, unless I believe they're grounded in a biblically accurate picture of history. And I don't believe, and neither do you, that the Hebrews built the pyramids. The pyramids transcend that. And again, what's critical for people to understand is this, is that those who control history determine the future. But there comes a time, just like Donald Trump. I said this, by the way, before he even officially announced, and I was asked by George Norrie on Coast to Coast if that was an endorsement. I said, yes. I said, if you look at the people that didn't like Donald Trump, they are the enemies of everything most of us would agree are enemies to freedom. And so when I said that, obviously people thought, Quayle's a Trump chump. Well, look at what, and I'm saying this because it's parallel to what we're talking about. As Donald Trump continues to share what he shares, and the left-hating, what would you call him? Just the entire pile of hatred towards Donald. I'm going to try and check my voice here, or my words. The entire Trump-hating establishment are revealing more and more of how, these are my words, sinisterly evil they truly are, and the contempt they have for the average man. So that's in the political realm. Now look at it in the Antarctic realm. The history of the world is totally not what it is. It's what the powers that be pretend it to be. And for the record, all of the world's leaders never believed that Hitler died in the bunker. I deal with that in my book. My book takes people from all the way through understanding the occult. This isn't a book report. I'm just saying this. There was no way in the natural I could have known 1 year ago in December that from that point forward, the headlines would talk about Hitler and would talk about Himmler's 13,000 volume occult library and all of the people that were going to the Antarctic. It was like a time key, Greg. And I believe CERN, and let me just say this, I believe that the experiments of CERN are like the master lock on the keys of all the vaults of locked up history. These guys will not be content until they not only open Pandora's box, which they've already done, but they release all the entities in Greek mythology, of which Pandora was a myth from Greek. And so I looked for the truth to come out. Genetic engineering now, genetic engineering is something that people have got to understand. I deal with that in my book too. When Dr. Mengele fled to Argentina and Brazil, there's a whole city in Brazil that has, 120 sets of twins. But Mengele did not stop with twinning. He went on to cloning. And now we're seeing all of the information. You got to admit, Greg, you're an old time a news reporter, not newspaper, but television guy. And what we're talking about today, wouldn't it have seemed like it was crazy 20 years ago?
Yeah, but I got to tell you, I mean, if you take a look at some of the things you talked about, the news show Taboo, the allegations is set in the 1814s, but what's the allegation? The main character ate flesh because he doesn't talk about it. One of the scenes just recently bites into somebody and takes a chunk out of them. Also, all the Egyptologists that have done on the History Channel. Maybe this is preparation for the big change that's coming. But there's one Egyptologist or a PhD in ancient geology. He says, listen, there's no way the Sphinx was built at the same time as the pyramid. It's 10 to 15,000 years earlier. And then if you take a look at the laser-cutted stones in Peru, the cities off the coast, 175 feet. This is also video, and also in your video, too, in this True Legends video, off the coast of India, that could date back 9,000 to 30,000 years. There's a whole lot of history that we don't know about. I want to just go back to the Lucifer telescope. What are they looking for? And you said it in your series, but I want to hear it from you. What are they looking for in that telescope? You say they're only looking for one thing. What are they looking for?
They're looking for the return of the Anunnaki. They're watching for, if you will, the complete onslaught, and I will say this, they're looking for the alien armada that they believe is coming to Earth. They believe that these are the gods that have created us, and this is going to throw a lot of Catholics into despair. The biblical believing Catholics will see it for what it is, but the rest of the world is not going to see it for what it is. So they're looking, they're monitoring, they're searching. And they believe that by having a heads up, Greg, on the timing of that, they can time their revelations. See, it's all like a tapestry. Everybody's been knitting and I don't know anything about tapestries except I've watched people do them, or whatever they're called. The thing is that every stitch has to be related to another stitch. And pretty soon all the puzzle pieces come together. But there is a time when the headlines of the world's paper, on television, everything will be talking about these are the returns of the gods and the gods who created us. We've seen it in so many Hollywood productions. If you take everything that has
which is a lie, which they'll be lying to us. That will be a lie.
This will be the biggest lie. And the Bible says that people are going to believe the lie. And because they reject the truth, God sends them strong delusion that they might believe the lie. So I think that God raises up people that are, want to tell people the truth so they have at least a choice. And I believe the choice is becoming more and more apparent. Look, I don't know the degree of all the sickness. I'm talking about the sick, disgusting people in Washington, the entertainment industry. But the two things you can't get away from are Satanism, pedophilia, and cannibalism, the three things. And so that's all come into the mainstream, even like I said, when it becomes, look at how cool it is. Well, take your neighbor to lunch, but he doesn't get it. He is lunch. Now, the point that we want to make and need to make is this, is that for people that are honestly wanting to know, I should be able to footnote my book with more than opinion, with more than editorializing. But as you've seen the book, Empire Beneath the Ice, how the Nazis won World War II, wouldn't you agree it's pretty well footnoted?
Yes, I would. There's pictures. It's if anybody buys this book, you can go to stevequayle.com and buy this book. It is very well done. And the video was, as a TV guy, it was very slickly done. It was very slickly done. I was like blown away. I started looking at it for some research notes, and I just stopped writing and just watched your video, which is pretty amazing. I'm a former Catholic. The pedophilia thing in New York when I was it. Boom. I have stepped foot, but only because I have Catholic friends. But just so you know that all Catholics are not in lockstep with this Pope.
Oh,
A
absolutely.
lot of Catholics are giving major pushback to Francis. Some of the most vehement criticism is coming inside the Catholic Church about Pope Francis. There are many ways to get to heaven. That's a huge lie. That you can do good works. That's a huge lie. That atheists can get to heaven. Of course, we know that's a huge lie. There's only one way. It's through Christ. And there are a lot of Catholics, just to give a shout out to the Catholics that aren't down with this. There are a lot of pushback inside the Catholic Church against this Pope.
Well, I went on record when I started my broadcasting career, 25 years ago, as stating that the greatest war coming within the Catholic Church. By the way, I don't bash Catholics. I'm just telling them what's going on.
Yeah. I'm with you. I didn't get that. Go ahead.
Yeah. But the greatest war would be between the traditional Bible believing and those who would be brought into a new Catholicism. Listen, you cannot put Jesus Christ on the same level as Mohammed. The God of heaven is not Allah. You don't kiss the Quran if you're the vicar of Christ.
Correct.
So the ultimate deception is now in the land. Let me make it real simple. It's like this. Who created us? God or the Anunnaki? Who is the real God? And see, this is something interesting. When you were talking about
God the Father.
God the Father. And, when you're talking about the dates of the pyramids or the Sphinx, and by the way, there are pyramids and Sphinx all over the world. And this is tough for people. If people really want to get it, even Mars, and I know this sounds really difficult, David Flynn, the late David Flynn, in my opinion, Greg, one of the smartest men ever in the world, equal, and I say this to Sir Isaac Newton, equal, and he was considered a pretty smart guy. When he started doing his investigation, this is critical to Antarctica, in his investigation into Cydonia, which is a region on Mars, and the pyramid and the face on Mars, and tying into, obviously, the Pyramid of Giza and, the three pyramids there. David did a marvelous job of laying it out. Unfortunately, he passed away of brain cancer and rapidly. But if you look at the evidence for a pyramidal, if you will, system across the country and stargates, by the way, they just released the CIA dossier, and isn't it interesting? One of the most important things is Operation Stargate. Now,
that's right. There we go. Back up with real headlines.
So here's the deal. There was a civilization, and again, I want to make this clear, not of human beings creating the image and likeness of God that happened after Genesis 1:1 and 1:2. And there are a lot of Christians, obviously, that don't buy this, okay? But the testimony of history, the testimony of monuments, when we're talking about in South America, when we're talking about Ollantaytambo and Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunka and all these places with gigantic megaliths, which, by the way, are called Cyclopean architecture.
Yeah, the 300-400 tons.
Oh yeah, or the stone of the pregnant woman in Lebanon. Here's what I'm saying: people can shake their head and say, "I don't believe that," but a superior technology basically cut those stones or poured them into place. A superior technology has possessed electrogravitics, in which certain harmonics can overset gravity. You can see that remember the old BASF commercial where they put a speaker, I think it was up, they were talking about how good their, what was it, not CDs, but cassettes, audio cassettes were, and they'd break the glass. Remember that?
Yeah.
Well, so real quickly, that they have in their own history that the giants, forgive me, but there were giants, and interesting enough,
it says so in the Bible.
Yeah, and it says so. Genesis 6, Genesis, Numbers 13:33. By the way, there's over 36 references to giants. Nimrod, who you mentioned earlier, is the builder, if you will, of Babylon, the Tower of Babel. I have been told by generals with 4 stars, okay? Now, that's a pretty high-ranking general. Obviously, Mattis has just become appointed one as, under Donald Trump, but that the technology of the ancients, they said you can't even put it in 100 years in advance. You can't even put it in 1,000 years of advance. They talk about it being, it's kind of like Back to the Future. We're talking about technology that the Antarctic, if you will, inhabitants possess that's beyond even most people's framework. And this isn't science fiction, but again, where they used to mock all this stuff, and let me share this from intelligence agents I've talked to. Hollywood and the intelligence community has a very unique relationship, symbiosis. Many times they leak advanced technology or advanced concepts into Hollywood to get it put into the realm of fiction, so people just automatically dismiss it because our brain structure, in my opinion, is being altered to such a degree that everything is a contemporary now input instead of long-term memory. You can see it. People have forgotten history. So if you're in control of the future, you want to divorce the people of every, I would say this, reality-based historical event and put them into what? A virtual world, an artificial world? And now we've got people that can't even communicate, Greg, because they're texting, typing, doing whatever they do. And if their world goes down, the power goes out, or their phone battery charger goes down, and they lose touch with whatever Twitter or Facebook or whatever those social media sites are, it takes them into a realm of upheaval and turmoil. So again, what we're seeing is electromagnetic devices that are altering the brain patterns, the thinking, and also the results. So, if you had somebody start out on Twitter, hey, the aliens just landed, and the guy is, do you see him? He's blonde haired, he's really cute, he's 9 feet tall, kind of like Independence Day. People will rush to that, whatever is the new instantaneous, if you will, point of the day.
Steve Quayle, I'm telling you, I am blown away. If people can look at this, let me go full screen here. People can look at your Legends series, which I'm not under any obligation. You don't pay me any money. I have you because I think you're smart and interesting, you can explain some things. This is a very excellent thing. Your partner Tim was in there, your business partner. Your book is just released, Empire Beneath the Ice, How the Nazis Won World War II, is out right now. You're going to get all this at, let me come back to you, Steve. You can get all this at stevequayle.com. Steve, I hope you come back. I want to have you on as a reoccurring guest. And for the longest time, you didn't have Skype. But Steve, thank you so much for coming on and trying to explain all these headlines and all the stuff that's popping up and the sourced real world about what's coming down the pike. I really appreciate having you on. Steve Quayle of stevequayle.com. Thanks for being on USAWatchdog.com.
Thank you, Greg.